You're listening to 90.3 WHPC, the voice of Nassau Community College in Garden City, New York. I'm Bill McIntyre here with Jon Gallo for another edition of this week's Long Island News, the news show that brings you news stories about Long Island and about Long Islanders.
We're very happy to welcome back to the show the newly installed Nassau County Executive, Bruce Blakeman. Thank you for joining us and our listeners today. How are you?
My pleasure. Thank you. Doing great.
Yeah, I saw your press conference this morning with the snow.
Yeah, so basically we had 5 to 7 inches in Nassau County.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and we did a great job. The roads are clear. We had men and women out working from the Department of Public Works in 81 trucks doing plowing and salting. We covered over 4,000 lane miles in Nassau County. That's approximately 3 passes for each road. And it's open and clear, but we are concerned about overnight temperatures. It's going to get very cold. So we have salt trucks out. They'll be out all day today, tonight and tomorrow during the day. And we're asking people, if it's not necessary to go out, stay home, because there could still be some patches of ice. Drive carefully, but if you don't have to go out, please stay home. And by Sunday, we're going to have warmer weather and rain, so it'll all be washed away by then.
From your lips to God's ears.
We can look forward to that, of course.
I'm watching the Weather Channel.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm watching the Weather Channel. That's what they say.
Go ahead.
Right. Oh, okay.
Okay, fair enough. So secondhand, again, reporting, of course, that's fine.
Yeah, and I guess it was a bit different handling a snow emergency as the county executive than it was working with the town of Hempstead.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So, the buck stops with me. So basically, I initiated the opening of our emergency offices and command center, just in case this became a bigger event than was predicted. Mm-hmm. So sometimes they can predict 4 to 6 inches, and it can end up being 10 to 12 inches. So I wanted to make sure our command center was open. So that was fully staffed at midnight last night. We had all our trucks out. We were fully staffed on all our trucks. We were operating at full strength. Our police department was operating at full strength, and we had the help and the assistance of our volunteer firefighters, which I want to thank them because they're always part of the emergency operations equation.
Of course, of course. So we see that you've hit the ground running, of course, and now you got your first major snowstorm under your belt. So I guess we're kind of wondering what grade would you give yourself, and also obviously the county workers for handling today's storm.
Well, I give the county workers an A+. I leave it up to other people to grade me. My job is to do the best I can to give 100%, to be there and lead. And I think we did that. I'm confident that we did a great job. But, I wasn't driving the snow plows or the salting trucks. Our workers were. So they did a great job, and all the accolades belong to them.
Yep, that's a true leader then, given, credit where credit is due always. So fair enough. And just in terms of, our PSA kind of responsibilities, we did want to remind Nassau County residents that they can contact the county's non-emergency call numbers at 516-537-0321 and snow concern hotlines, I believe, at 516-571-6900. And also, if I'm not mistaken, there's the Nassau County's Department of Social Services Warm Bed Winter Sheltering Program, which can be reached at 1-866-WARM-BED. Is that correct, County Executive?
That's correct. And our warming centers are open. Our police officers are out. If they see someone in distress, they will handle it. If there is a homeless situation, we will try and bring the homeless people to a place that they can be warm and safe.
Mm. Yeah, and that's in these times, that's not just a question of comfort. We're talking about saving lives too. People get stuck out there in a storm. Yeah.
Oh yeah, very treacherous at times. So now turning from the storm response to the pandemic response, we all know that there's been an uptick both in infection rate. There've been some additional school closures in the last few weeks here with the Omicron variant kind of spreading. That said, you had a major announcement yesterday regarding mask mandates. So can you tell our listeners about the executive orders you signed yesterday, and in particular the one regarding school districts being able to choose whether mask mandates for students would need to be followed?
Yeah, so basically, I've talked to hundreds, if not thousands, of parents in Nassau County who really want it to be optional whether or not their children have to wear masks. They're concerned about a lot of the emotional issues and a lot of the societal issues that wearing a mask for someone who's in school presents. So I thought that the best course of action here in Nassau County, because we're much different than the rest of the state, and I can go into that in detail, but the best course of action was to let each individual school district determine whether or not their children need to wear masks based on what they're seeing in the various schools that they cover. So again, Nassau County is a very unique place. Our population is larger than 9 states. Yep. We have world-class health facilities. We have Northwell. We have NYU Langone. We have Mount Sinai Hospital. We have Nassau University Medical Center, Winthrop University Medical Center, the Catholic University Hospital System. We have more quality health care than other parts of the state. The governor is from Buffalo, which is closer to Toronto than it is to Nassau County. So I don't think we should be painted with the same broad brush. We have mask fatigue here in Nassau County. People want to get back to normal. And it's about time that we start realizing that COVID's going to be with us for a while and take material steps like I have taken in the last couple of days, where this weekend we will hand out 160,000 tests free to our residents so that they can test themselves. And if there's an issue, they can get the proper health care. They can do the proper quarantining. We are handing out KN95 masks. Those are the masks that really work, not these paper ones.
Great.
To our teachers so we can keep schools open. And we're opening free vaccination pods. So we're taking a very, very serious approach to combating COVID-19. But masks are the least important in the equation. And we have to look at the collateral damage that wearing masks does. And quite frankly, our county workers have said enough is enough. Most of them said, we want the option about whether to wear a mask or not.
Okay, I hear this, but one of the things that gets me though is that when this thing first started, at one point in time, we had 800 deaths a day in the state of New York. We didn't have any vaccines at that time. And the state managed to bring that number down to like less than 50. And the only tool that they used was masks. That kind of, flies in the face of...
That's completely incorrect.
Yeah, okay.
It's the vaccinations that have been the driving force in keeping hospitalization rates down and keeping ICU admissions down. There is no material evidence whatsoever that masks have been a strong contributing factor. They may be a factor, but basically it's about testing, it's about vaccinations, and if we're going to make people wear masks, if it's that important, then the state should provide the right masks, which are the KN95s or the N95s, because those are the ones that can prevent somebody from contracting COVID-19. But what we're seeing here is, what we're seeing here in Nassau County is, predictably, our hospitalization rate was going to go up after Christmas and after New Year's. People were together, they were going to functions, and it's all very predictable. We talked to our health department, we talked to the various hospital networks. It was all manageable. It's still manageable. Our ICU admissions went up slightly, and our death rate is stable. It's not nearly what it was 9 months ago. So
yes, thank God.
Basically, we're in really good shape. It's time to get back to normal again, and we're going to fight COVID-19 with all our strength, but we're going to do it in a way that doesn't give people a false sense of security, but really helps them in a material way. And we're serious about it here in Nassau County.
Okay, understood, County Executive. And, like I said, certainly, we've talked to a lot of medical professionals, and certainly, they agree that the N95 mask, the KN95 mask certainly offer a lot different protection than the other masks. But that said, we have heard from folks who agree that they are part of the, kind of method to address the situation as a whole. So to your point, but I just wanted to kind of ask then about, since your decision and the executive order does run counter to the state, directive that the governor issued, and she did already push back against your decision at a news conference, which mounted and has been reported as basically a veiled threat to withhold state education funding from the county for potentially disobeying the state rule. So I know she had a specific quote, but again, what are your thoughts on what she said? And I know also the New York State Board of Ed also had some strong comments today.
Yeah, so I'd like the governor to reconsider her position and allow local government and local school boards to make a determination with respect to the mask mandate and whether or not they're going to enforce it, just like she has given us the ability on a county-wide basis, county by county, to make those decisions with the rest of the mask mandates. I don't know why there's an inconsistency and that we have the ability to determine whether we want to enforce the mask mandate universally, but school districts can't do that for their various schools. So I think that's inconsistent. But look, we're not looking for a fight with the governor or with the state government. We would just like to we would like them to recognize that Nassau County is different, that we have world-class health facilities that are nowhere near capacity, and that this Omicron variant, while highly contagious, is not causing serious illness except in people primarily who are over 70 years of age, unvaccinated, and have underlying health conditions.
Okay, fair enough. And I would say that in terms of the decision, I imagine, of course, the county's council, they obviously vetted this, and are there expected legal challenges in terms of what the state or by the school districts? What do you anticipate, I guess, on that front, or do you think this kind of ends here?
Well, I can't speculate on what the state might do or the local school boards, but I have signed the executive order. I'm hoping, again, that the governor realizes that we're in a much different position here in Nassau County. And don't treat us like the rest of the state. We're larger than 9 states in population. We have our own health department, and we have healthcare facilities that are second to none. So why paint us with the same broad brush as some other part of the state where they may not have the hospital capacity that we have, and where they may not have their own health department like we have. We have a very sophisticated health department with what I think is a very competent health commissioner. And that's our situation here in Nassau County. So don't paint us with the same broad brush as the rest of the state. Do it on a case-by-case basis. That's the best way to handle it. And I don't want, again, to have a controversy. I would like the governor to reconsider her position and let Nassau County make decisions that are best for Nassau County.
Okay, fair enough. And in the meantime, again, the New York State Board of Ed Commissioner did put out the notice today saying that they will direct the schools to comply with state orders, not the county as of now. But like I said, I'm sure we'll stay tuned and we'll see, what ultimately shakes out here regarding that. But, I guess, like I said, regardless of this home rule discussion, which, again, is a little bit in the weeds, I think, for most people and, a little bit kind of, not clear, for those who don't speak a little bit of legalese. But what about even the budget, I guess? And, I guess, do we expect this to be a relatively contentious kind of go? I know you said you're not picking fights, but, realistically, what about those folks who are a little bit concerned about, how this might impact, whether it's funding for LIRR, funding for, roads and other things? Do you think there's any merit to that? Or do you think, like I said, that won't be an issue?
No, I don't think the governor will act in a punitive manner. She's certainly seen how that has really deteriorated the support of her predecessor. Government shouldn't bully people. They should have discussions, negotiations, and compromise. And basically, if the governor were acting in a punitive manner, I think that would be something that would hurt her more than it would the residents of the county of Nassau. So I'm not expecting she'll do that. I certainly hope she wouldn't do that. Again, bullying is not something that leaders should do. They should lead by example and by making the good argument, the good case, and back it up with facts.
Okay, very good then. So let's remind the listeners they are listening to this week's Long Island News here on 90.3 WHPC, the voice of Nassau Community College. We are here still, Bill McIntyre, myself, Jon Gallo, thankfully joined by the Nassau County Executive, Bruce Blakeman. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, I get, when we spoke last time, we understood why you don't want a mask mandate. I get that. But short of that, would you, as the county executive, recommend to the citizens of Nassau County that they wear a mask?
I would recommend that people should do what they feel comfortable doing. I think that it's a personal choice. I think that when it comes to healthcare decisions, it's a choice between the patient and their physician, and that, government should not be overburdening and overbearing with the manner in which they treat their residents. So again, I think more can be done by making the good case and backing it up with facts. And as we've seen in Nassau County, that's why our vaccination rate is so high, because when I was with the town of Hempstead, we were the leader in getting a mobile vaccination unit so that people who wanted to get vaccinated would get vaccinated free. We were the first in the state to do that. So I think that's the way to handle it. Make it available, make it affordable or free if it's possible, and don't force people to do things. Try to make the good argument. And most people are reasonable, they're rational, and they will listen to reason.
Yeah, we certainly hope so.
One of the reasons that exists, and one that you just brought up, is the fact that Long Island has a lot of good health care available. What I would be curious to see is the bills that the people got who actually survived and went home. And because this health care that we all, relish is very expensive.
Yeah, there's no question about that healthcare is expensive, but we have the best healthcare here in Nassau County in the world. We are lucky to have such great healthcare networks. We have our own public benefit corporation hospital in Nassau University Medical Center that has a world-class trauma unit. So we're trying to keep it affordable here in Nassau County, but it's a nationwide issue, and it's one that should be addressed.
Of course. And maybe transitioning, from the, we'll say the public health aspect of the pandemic to something I know that, certainly you care a lot about in terms of economic development. What are your thoughts on where we stand in the small business recovery process? I know the county's played a role. I know even the governor had some comments about maybe some rebates for some of the cost incurred by businesses. So what is your thought on, kind of setting yourself apart from the previous administration and, moving forward, I guess, on that matter?
Well, I think the difference is the previous administration entered into a very cynical program, which I believe it was politically motivated, to give every resident that requested $375 as the county's way of improving the economy and helping people cope with COVID-19. I would have done it a different way. I think the way we did it in the town of Hempstead was the better way, where we spent money on mobile vaccinations, where we had vaccination pods set up, where we entered into healthcare agreements with our healthcare providers to make sure people got testing, to make sure that people got vaccinations, by handing out PPP to our small businesses, by amending our zoning laws to allow businesses to operate in a different manner than they would have if it wasn't for COVID-19. Those are material things that we did in the town of Hempstead, which quite frankly is 60% of the population of Nassau County and the largest township in America, larger than 3 or 4 states. And Boston. We did it the right way. And I think giving $375 out willy-nilly to anybody who asked for it, whether they need it or not, was something that was completely politically motivated during the campaign. And it was not the best way to spend our COVID-19 money that we got from the federal government.
Okay, fair enough. And to that point, we have spoken with, a lot of your colleagues at the town of Hempstead, including obviously Supervisor Don Clavin a number of times. And certainly, we appreciate a lot of those programs that a lot of the CARES Act and other, federal funding kind of helped initiate. And we've talked to, in particular, Councilmember D'Esposito about some of those kind of human services programs throughout the pandemic, because we all talk about the public health in terms of the actual virus. But then we know that, whether it be substance abuse and addiction, whether it be, food insecurity, a million other kind of social issues that kind of stem from it. The county has a role, whether they're veteran services or other. What are your thoughts on just that, the county's role, in this process of recovering from the pandemic regarding more human services?
Well, whether we had a pandemic or not, I don't think we're investing enough of our efforts and our resources in alcohol and drug abuse, especially among our young people. So that's going to be a priority for me. I think that's the best way to keep our young people healthy, to keep people healthy who have been traumatized by COVID-19. And I'd like to see us do more in that regard. And I've told the people in my administration that is going to be a priority for me. So I think rehabilitation, recovery, and education are very important in the equation of solving that. And also, I think it'll keep people out of jail. And it'll be a lot more cost effective than jailing people for those types of things. Look, I'm very tough on crime, and I want to see the repeal of the Bail Reform Act. But I also think that we also have to attack the problem. And one of the problems is that we do have a substance abuse problem throughout the United States, and we're not spending enough resources on education, recovery, and rehabilitation.
Yeah, that's important. I think, rings true to a lot of Long Islanders' ears in terms of, getting more resources for these, kind of social issues so that you kind of nip them at the bud, for lack of a better phrase, as opposed to them kind of becoming larger issues manifested down the road that, could cost more money, even just from a pure accounting standpoint, from criminal justice or a healthcare kind of perspective. So yeah, that's fair, and it's good to know that a lot of those agencies that sometimes people see as points for cuts and austerity, especially as tough times, hopefully some of them we see kind of their bigger value of and see that that's not really too feasible to cut their budgets. But turning to another issue, and I think you referenced it a little bit before, I know Bill has some specific questions regarding the property tax reassessment. We know that's a priority of yours and, a major, campaign platform item. So I guess my question would be, how do you, plan to bring your, plans now into action?
Well, we know that the reassessment system is broken because there's no other explanation why someone who has a home that's worth over $3.5 million would pay zero in property taxes due to the reassessment, or that there would be two homes in Massapequa, same community, right next door to each other, completely identical, and one is assessed at 30% more than the other. So we know it's broken. Right now, we have a team of professionals that we're assembling to find out exactly why it's broke, because we still have not gotten the secret formula from the prior administration, the algorithm that they use. There's all kinds of rumors about how they arrived at the assessment values, but we know it's broke. We've got to fix it. We're going to assemble really smart people. We're going to figure it out. We're going to get it done. Okay.
Yeah. Bill, did you have any other
And with
questions?
that, guys, I have to jump into a staff meeting
Okay, yeah.
on the snow event. So
Okay.
I want to thank you. I'm a big supporter of Nassau Community College. It's a great institution, and you're providing a great service to all Nassau County residents, but especially the great students and faculty administration at our community college, which is really an important place. And I want to make it the jewel of the community college system in New York State. I want it to be the best community college in the world. And we're going to make sure that the community college has the resources to increase their enrollment, which is way down under my predecessor. The enrollment's gone completely down south. We want to get that up, and we want the community college to flourish. So thank you for communicating with, your students, faculty, administration, as well as the greater Nassau County public. Thanks so much.
Well,
we
thank
appreciate
you for
your
that.
support.
Definitely. And we hope to speak to you soon.
Stay safe.
Be well.
Be
Definitely
safe out
the same.
there.
Safe and healthy.
Okay, Bill. Yeah, a lot of food for thought, of course. Obviously, a very in-demand interview right now. Obviously, the county executive has only been in office for about a week. Time is flying quick, but it seems like certainly he's definitely making a lot of news and in the headlines right now. We didn't get really to talk about some of the more criminal justice reform, bail reform issues. Call for the repeal of it, obviously, as a whole. So, like I said, we'll get to have those conversations another time. But certainly a lot there in terms of the main issue being his executive order, which he signed yesterday, and kind of we'll say response or backlash from the state government.
Well, we're all going to sit back and watch unfold whatever's to come. Like you mentioned, I'm sure there'll be lawsuits and there'll be a reaction to it. The state education department is going to have a lot to say, as is state government.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, everyone has.
I'm sure we could look back in history someplace and see where this has happened before and just what the outcome was.
Yeah, that's why, again, I know we're going to have Yancey on now in a few seconds here, and certainly he is a wealth of knowledge institutionally in terms of, we'll say, the trials and tribulations of, the governors and the local lawmakers and stuff like that in terms of different beefs. So, maybe we can see if he has a little more insight, of course, on, what has happened before and maybe if there are any parallels to draw from this time. So, like I said, a lot there. I know there's still some points of disagreement, of course, with you personally. And I think a lot of folks, including a lot of medical health professionals who we have spoken to before, of course, on record, who, we're saying that, again, and to be fair, not just County Executive Blakeman, but the former County Executive, Laura Curran, at least in the duration where she had kind of known she wasn't going to be reelected, she decided to not really enforce Governor Hochul's emergency mask mandate or proof of vaccination status. It's an either or. People have to, understand that's what it was. And it's only a temporary order, I believe, to the 15th. But the point was she didn't do it, but she didn't go to the step of actually signing an executive order of it. It was kind of more just don't ask, don't tell, And,
right. One of the questions that, I don't think it's ever actually been specifically addressed, and I haven't seen any stories about it. Excuse me. Who actually was enforcing? Well, if a business says, no shoes, no shirt, no service, and now they added masks to that, who was the enforcement?
Well, we talked to, the public health commissioner, Dr. Larry Eisenstein a number of times. And, we mentioned a little bit the fact that they did have traditional oversight, like restaurants, that, let's say, had, food sanitation
preparation and all that.
Yeah, whatever it may be, stuff like that, E. coli, all that fun stuff. So the point was that, they had an in-place kind of infrastructure on how to do some of these checks and give some violations, but that's not the same as, going around and checking the air filtration in every, building.
Oh, well, that,
Throughout Long Island, you know what I mean?
I was just talking about, I didn't read a story anywhere where somebody called the police and they came to a restaurant and enforced a mask mandate.
Well, I recall in the beginning,
do you?
This was happening, yes. Definitely under the Cuomo administration, early on, before vaccines were even out, and approved. There were a couple of high-profile incidents. One, I think, out in Suffolk near the water, where they had gone, they gave them warnings, they kept slapping them on the wrist, and then they kept having these big parties in defiance. And then eventually, either the SLA, State Liquor Authority, or whatever government stepped in and said, nope, time to stop that.
Right, except that I see that as a bigger issue. They were having parties with 3,500 people. I'm just talking about a regular restaurant who had someone at the door that said, I don't want to wear a mask.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm coming in for dinner.
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, and they don't tell you to call the police. It's not the point.
Right, and it was the poor. It was the poor kid at the door who was seating customers that wound up being the front line.
Minimum wage, like you said, having to try to navigate this awkward situation that they have no control in whatsoever. But we're kind of just subject to. But like I get it. I get we're all fatigued. We talked about this from the beginning that it's not in human nature to just kind of comply with certain things and to deal with these. But I do
one thing I have to disagree with the county executive on the idea that it was simply vaccines that brought down the number of deaths in New York State, because vaccines did not exist at that time.
Yeah. He admitted, again, in the sense that, he supports the idea of good masks, which I think is a no-brainer. But beside that, the fact is that, basically he, he said to us that it's a part of a larger approach. So he's basically just weighting masks differently than I think a lot of the public are. Right. No one can say that one thing is the magic panacea or silver bullet. That's not. Of course.
But we can, in a sense, say that because at the beginning of this pandemic, there were no vaccines, and the only tools we had.
But also, we had social distancing, and we had businesses shut down after 6 p.m. You know what I mean?
And people stayed home, fine. Yeah, but all of those conditions should exist at the same time anyway. I mean,
now that's a complicated, actuarial. I think quantifying conversation that is way beyond my brain of math, basically. But like I said, I think it's valid. I know a very public kind of profile public health official who's on network news, called out the decision as completely inconceivable, I think is what he said, in terms of what the order was out here. I think he's from Columbia, public health school in the city. And, again, we've talked to, what was it? The doctor, the lead of critical care services. No, Eisenstein we've talked to, but Kaseri. Yep, Kaseri recently, in terms of him saying that, he was upset. I don't want to say upset, but, a bit frustrated, him and some of his colleagues, about, the fact that County Executive Curran didn't enforce it, and that these things were always slow to kind of come, leading behind what they were saying, the medical professionals on the front lines. But nonetheless, like I said, this is the reality we live in, and these are the players at hand. And, all we're here to do is try to, hear what they're saying. You guys can all make decisions for yourselves on what you agree with, what you don't agree with, of course. And like I said, that's part of the process. But when it comes down to it, we all want to make sure that we live in a safe, environment that, make sure that we have an opportunity to prosper all of our families in whatever way.
I think that the contrast here is that, let's just say, in a hypothetical, beautiful world, everybody just said, you know what? Yep, we're going to get vaxxed. We're going to wear masks. I think that the end result of that would have been, we would have seen an end to the coronavirus as a, even as a yearly flu kind of thing. But because of all the hemming and hawing, I think we're never going to see the end.
Well, that's what he kind of reserved it to. He reserved it to, it'll be like a flu. And I think that can be fair, that it might just be just that, eventually, as opposed to.
Or are people resigning themselves to that's going to be the condition? And so we'll get in step with, okay, well let's just accept it.
Well, meanwhile, it could have potentially been like smallpox, where it's completely, eradicated. And it's not even a thing that future generations will, even think about, versus this, where, again, like other things that
we're keeping just enough of it alive. We're keeping just enough of it alive for it to be a forever thing in our future.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. I mean, I know there's always science out there, and I know there's reporting about Omicron, having some potential additional potential kind of immunity towards Delta variant, some other variants that might be, at least in terms of outcomes on paper, a little more severe. I don't know. Who's to say?
Well, one of the other things I wanted to that I missed the opportunity to say, I was curious how the county exec feels about the the edict about it's not really an edict, it's an idea, I guess. The booze to go. His counter was that he wants to spend more money on rehab, and which it has been a battle cry for every administration, from the beginning of time.
Yeah, the opioid epidemic in particular.
Some do something and others don't. But it's a great statement. But I'm curious, because those two things are at odds.
No, I hear you. And I would like to next time, because this weekend actually gambling, legalized online mobile sports betting comes into action. Yep. That's going to be a big change for a lot of folks. You're going to see people now not just looking at fantasy football for the fun of it, but putting good money on it and losing good money on it.
Right.
So the point is, that's a whole nother public health concern to an extent, but it's also a way for the state and other places to make good revenue. But I don't know. That's another interesting topic that I wonder how he feels. I know he's had also issues with Belmont Arena. So next time when we get him on, we'll talk about those too.
And now we'd like to welcome to the show Yancey Roy from Newsday. And Yancey, thank you for joining us for another year of helping our listeners make sense of what's happening in Albany and New York State politics.
Glad to do it.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
Always to get your take.
Always appreciate your perspective. And
I would love to have a show of just us sitting around a table and talking about all the politics. But
a lot of rooms you've been around over the years, and that'll be the same case here this year, watching as things develop in the states. So let's start off with Yancey. We know some things have changed since we last spoke at the end of last year. The Attorney General, Letitia James, has dropped out of the race for governor. New Albany session has just started, and Governor Hochul just laid out her vision/platform in her State of the State address. So can you catch our listeners up on your major takeaways for Long Islanders and the possible local implications of some of her plans?
Well, she's got some Long Island specific plans. Some of them are kind of very specific, such as finish the third track for the LIRR. Begin a project to address what's called the Oakdale Merge, which is sort of a high traffic jam sort of area out there where they've requested some state assistance to reconfigure that. There's initiatives to drive more research to Stony Brook University and Cold Spring Harbor lab as well. So there's some specific sort of Long Island goodies in there. Overall, I think that her State of the State address just delivered this week had two focuses primarily. One is at the very beginning to sort of remind voters and legislators and onlookers that I'm not Cuomo and this is a different administration. And she said that right at the beginning with saying something, and I'm paraphrasing here, but the days of turf battles with the legislature are over. The days of the mayor of New York and the governor of New York, endless squabbling, are over. And so I think that one of the main things she wanted to do was set a new tone. And then the second big thrust of her policies were really about COVID and how to continue to deal with all of the COVID. I mean, the top line of that was a proposal to do a massive expansion of the healthcare workforce, doing raises, more hiring, bonuses, loan forgiveness for doctors or nurses who agree to go to underserved areas, those sorts of things. That was a big focus of everything she did. And folks might say, oh, okay, that's great. How do you pay for that, or how do they? Well, we'll see some of the details in about 2 weeks or less than 2 weeks now when she unveils her proposed state budget. But keep in mind, the state, like a lot of states, got a ton of federal pandemic aid. So cash flow is probably not a problem right now. And that's why they're calling for a number of these expansions. There was a number of housing initiatives as well and environmental initiatives as well. So you'll see those spelled out in more detail when she unveils a budget in about somewhere around the 18th, if not sooner, but probably around the 18th of January. And then you'll see exactly how she pays for it. But in the broad strokes, that's how New York is planning to spend more, is a lot of federal aid.
Okay, fair enough. Like I said, I know she talked about things that Long Islanders care about, like property tax rebates for lower and middle class homeowners.
Right.
Talked about those investments in offshore wind, which seem to likely impact Long Islanders, in some capacity, and some other things that were maybe lower ticket items like alcohol to go. And I know she name checked potholes. But interested in whatever else you think also might be important. But one thing I have to say she didn't mention, which you pointed out in your piece, was bail reform and those types of laws. So you want to talk about that, I guess, and some of the other takeaways?
Yeah, thanks for mentioning those others. Yeah, there is a lot of offshore wind development, continued push for that, which of course would affect Long Island. Alcohol to go was a COVID popular item for restaurants and bars that help them sort of stay in business, and they know
not for liquor stores though. I think it's some other places, I'm sure.
Yeah. I think that bail, she did not mention it. She did mention a number of crime initiatives, such as more money for gun tracing, more money for more troopers, more money to have partnerships where you have these specific trooper teams go into a city or a community where there's a specific crime problem or high crime problem to help them address that. But she did not mention bail. And I think, certainly the Republicans and some Democrats want her to do something to just remind folks, in the simplest terms, 2 years ago, the legislature passed a law to eliminate bail for almost all misdemeanors and most nonviolent crimes altogether. Republicans and others say that's letting too many people out and they're recommitting crimes. But there's also a small percentage of folks who are doing that. But it's become an issue a little bit. Certainly, Republicans used it in 2021 local campaigns, as you saw in Long Island, effectively winning some, probably because of that issue. Tom Suozzi, the congressman who wants to run in a primary against Kathy Hochul, has been banging the drum on that, as have the Republican candidates. Right now, the legislature, Andrew Stewart Cousins say, we're not going to make a knee-jerk reaction or act out of hysteria. We want to see more facts and data before we do anything. But right now, we're not pushing to do anything. And I think the fact that Hochul did not put that in her speech is partially a reflection of that reality, that the legislature as a whole, which is Democrat controlled, 2/3 majority, more than 2/3 majority in each house, is as a whole is not necessarily inclined to do much right now with bail. And if they are to do it, well, we'll tackle it later. But I suppose the Hochul thinking was, I'm not going to put that at the forefront of the agenda as something I need to get done this year.
Yeah, during an election year, of course. So, that certainly is a lot of important context. But, maybe it merits bringing up the fact that we did just speak to the new Nassau County Executive, Blakeman, who's taken over the helm here at the county government. And he's certainly, been picking a couple of battles, to say it the least, with the state government and the governor. In particular, with this issue, bail reform, and in terms of him calling for the repeal of the laws. I know there have been some tweaks, and I know, like I said, there have been talk by both the governor, I think the mayor from the city, Adams, about considering it. But like you said, it didn't seem, that as of indicated by her speech, maybe something that she really wants to have out in the public, because it is contentious. But just a basic policy question, I guess I had, in terms of the calls to repeal the law, isn't that is that possible, or isn't that you'd have to introduce a new law because the law is on the books already, right?
The repeal is not going to happen. It's an easy thing for political types or people running for office or whatever to say we're going to repeal the law. I mean, we want a full repeal. I mean, that's sort of like a rhetorical tactic, right? We need a full repeal. I mean, what's more realistic is if they do anything, is to do some adjustments. And I don't know, exactly how that would happen. I don't know if you add more crimes. Right now, there's in simple terms, there's sort of a list of crimes, if you will, that a judge cannot impose bail. There's, certain crimes, well, it's not so-called bail eligible. Well, in theory, you could maybe add to specifically pass an amendment or some sort of legislation. Would add to the list of those crimes. Maybe you think that there were some crimes that could be categorized as passing that threshold that shows someone is dangerous to the public, and we should add that back. They did tweak that. They did tweak that a little in 2020. They did add some more crimes to it at the suggestion of the DA's Association. So they've done that once. I mean, they could always go back and add more crimes to that list that might be bail eligible, but a full-scale repeal, I mean, that's really not likely to happen. It's just more a campaign device.
Right, but in tweaking that list a bit, though, that really doesn't turn the tide as far as giving judges more discretion.
Not in. If you're saying judges should always have discretion about whether to make a call, no. There's a set list of how far a judge can go on any crime. I mean, and that's sort of similar about federal statutes, right? There's lots of very hard guidelines about what kind of sentence or actions a judge can take on any type of crime at the federal level. So, in a sense, that's always been part of the justice system. It's more of a question of, where do you want to draw the lines for leeway, right?
Yeah, like I said, what do you want to specify as
well, and the way the law is written, I mean, they could have made a list and said, okay, judges can look at this list, and anything on this list they can give discretion to not have any bail.
Right, and keep in mind, we should also mention that the argument for having no bail and the argument for limiting judicial discretion was that in practice, what happened was that more minorities were held on bail, held on steep bail, and so that was a concern that was showing bias within the justice system, and right. So that and then you also had horror stories, right? Of
course, people languishing for
making it up, but like you get $1,000 bail on a low-level crime that you or your family couldn't raise, and a person's sitting in there for 6 months or a year. For
3 years was the 3 years.
The Khalif Browder example. Right, so certainly, and I know we've had those conversations before, and I know this will still be an ongoing topic of discussion into the new year, like we said, regardless of if, really tangible kind of changes are made to the policy. But, turning maybe from that to another issue that, again, the county executive, not to, say too much, but we did just speak with him in terms of the battles he's picking with the governor regarding the mask mandates. And I know the Department of Ed, Betty De La Rosa, I believe, the commissioner, as well as NYSHOD, and also obviously the governor herself, kind of pushed back on what he was claiming, that executive order he signed yesterday would allow. So could you tell us about that? I know he raised home rule, and I think there might be some, kind of misunderstanding out in the public, how that plays. So can you kind of give a little more clarity to what he's saying and, what the facts are, I guess, of what's, kind of shaking out?
Well, I mean, I think that, again, this might go to court and we'll get a definitive answer, but by and large, state rule is usually going to prevail, as Kathy Hochul said here, and as the state ed department said. What's interesting, it makes me think of, there's been governors even in other states. I'm thinking of Texas, for an example, where they tried to say no mask, no sort of mandate, but school districts themselves decided to do it anyway. And so, it's certainly Blakeman who's talked about this issue during the campaign and pushed for it. It's kind of no surprise that he would seek to take that action. Whether any school follows it, whether it goes to court and gets challenged is a whole nother matter.
Of course, yeah. And to that point, the Board of Ed is saying that they are not going to comply with the county's order. They were going to comply with the state order, as it were. So, okay, we will see. Certainly, 'cause the question is, ultimately, besides the politics of it, is, what does that mean for school funding and even, to the budget to an extent? What does that mean? Will Long Island get some blowback because of, this decision? So I'm sure, people will be we'll find out more about that. I don't know if you had anything else on that specifically, but I guess otherwise, like you mentioned, Congressman Swazi is running. Letitia James has stepped out of the race. It seems that she was going to be, at least on paper, the closest competition. But he's trying to, raise his clout, I guess, had that press conference and is, like I said, beating the drum on crime and homelessness issues. Can you talk about maybe his chances and also the story that you wrote yesterday in terms of John Kamen, who's entering the race? What's the landscape of that looking like for CD3 over here?
Sure. Let's start with Swazi. I mean, he has shown that he wants to be all in on this race. I know that some Democratic leaders, specifically the state Democratic chairman, Jay Jacobs, has urged him to reconsider running for governor and instead run for re-election to Congress. At this point, there's really no indication that Swazi's of a mind to do that, though. He is going full speed ahead right with the race for governor. He's taken on some interesting tactics with Hochul. He's, if you notice, he sends out statements and releases calling her the interim governor.
Yeah.
Trying to take her down a notch, if you will. And he's, in a way, been, at least right now, campaigning on a couple of things, which is COVID and crime, which shows clearly that he thinks the lane for him is to run politically to the right of Hochul and position himself in a more center of the political spectrum, maybe thinking that that's sort of the Cuomo Democrats that would back him. And keep in mind now we're here at the end of this first full week of January. In about 8 days or so, the campaigns are going to have to report their finance fundraising totals, which might be an indication of where folks are. Swazi started with about $3 million. I mean, if he doesn't show much gain, that might tell people one thing. If he shows 5 million or more, maybe that shows that he's definitely in. So switch gears from there. With Swazi going forward, and the idea that Swazi is in the race for governor to stay, I think an indication of that is John Kamen jumping into the race. John Kamen was a former North Hempstead town supervisor. He's been a judge. He was Cuomo's point man on a lot of Hurricane Sandy relief programs, and he's been Suffolk County executive deputy. He jumps into the race run for Congress. He ran, by the way, in 2016 in a primary against Swazi and lost. So he's just the latest Democrat, but arguably maybe the highest profile named Democrat so far to jump in. There are others, and there still might be others. And we don't know the full slate of Republican candidates who might be out there. George Santos, who ran in go around, is raising money and says he's running again. So it might be a very crowded field for District 3. And also a little bit of the wild card right now, what are the boundaries of the district going to be? We are at that point where this year is the year where the state legislature, as every 10 years, must redraw congressional lines per the census. We know they have to change somewhat because New York is losing a congressional seat. So no matter what, they'll change somewhat. Do they change dramatically in Long Island and New York 3 or just minimally? I mean, the district has been largely Democrat, although not overwhelmingly Democrat. That's why Swazi's able to win. You might not know the lines until, at best, the end of January or maybe February, and that might also alter who decides to win.
Definitely a lot to start off the year here, and we know you're certainly busy, with the session, kind of having that, start kind of already and going into the full session fully kind of next week. So definitely we're going to be following all your reporting. We certainly encourage everyone, as always, to subscribe to Newsday, follow Yancey on social media and all of his colleagues as well, because there's a lot of information that moves quickly and is important for all of us to know here in New York and on Long Island. So thank you as always, Yancey. Always a pleasure. Happy New Year's, and we'll talk to you again, I'm sure, soon.
Thank you, guys.
Yes, thank you very much. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay.
Let's just close maybe with a discussion of this being basically the anniversary of what happened last year. We talked about it with Robert Brodsky at the time from Newsday, about the siege at the Capitol, about the folks who violently tried to, stop an election from being certified, and again, breached the Capitol building, the rotunda, got into the chambers. One person was shot on site and killed. Other police from the Capitol had been killed through the melees and through afterwards. I know a number of even taken their lives. So it's certainly been a pretty disastrous situation, even just for the people there, let alone the ramifications, nationally and globally regarding democracy. So what are your thoughts, Bill, I guess, in terms of where we're at?
One of the things that I saw, one of the things that I did see is that people on social media were taking umbrage to the comparison of the insurrection at the Capitol to, the Holocaust, or actually not to the Holocaust. It was to the 2001 September 11th attack on the World Trade Center, and there was another terrorist attack. But the reason I think that it was brought up is what makes the insurrection different is that these were American citizens attacking their own country.
Yeah, that's the whole, foreign terrorism is certainly a threat, but domestic is in some ways even more unsettling because... Oh,
it was Pearl Harbor. That was it. They were comparing Pearl Harbor and September 11th with the insurrection. And people were taking umbrage at the, obviously missing the point that one was homegrown terrorism and the others were foreign countries attacking us, which, in the name of war and all that, we get that. This was different, and I think America is totally unaware of the atmosphere they're in now. These are those like middle times. But if you want to read some history, read about Serbia and what happened to overnight, how that country changed. Because we have the same atmosphere here.
Yeah, well,
democratic institutions have been undermined. People don't trust their government anymore. People don't trust each other anymore. We've actually divided a society, and it's a dangerous time for America. And I don't think, most people see that. And that statement that, bad things happen when good people refuse to say anything. The only thing I could say to America in general is make sure you go out and vote. In every freaking election that you can, vote.
Yep, dog catcher all the way on up to the president. Like I said, regardless of who you vote for, you got to be in it to win it. To be simplistic, and
everybody's got to vote. And there are
that if you're not in it and you lose it,
but you also have to recognize that there are concerted efforts by people in power to try to make sure you can't vote, and you should be aware of that too.
And that tells you that there's, power in it. Like I said, it certainly is not perfect. There's certainly other civic, activities and civic engagement that you can do besides once a year, every 4 years. By all means,
exactly right.
We encourage you to.
We all need to get more involved. I think one of the news stories, one of the news stories in the last few weeks that I thought was very telling, Devin Nunes is quitting Congress to become the CEO for Donald Trump's media empire. And what that tells me, apparently, is those folks feel that there's more power in propaganda than there is in Congress.
Well, it tells you that once you have a certain brand, it might be good for certain parts of your constituency, but it doesn't mean it's good for all of your constituency. And that's what you need to win re-elections, like I said. But that's the thing. Some people, they're liked enough in their district, but they get all the support from national, from being a darling, whether it's, an AOC, again, not to equate, but in terms of, on the progressive front, or if it's, someone, I don't know who a great example is, but like a Jim Jordan or someone on the right perspective who are, again, I'm sure that, they both have somewhat safe districts, but that basically, they're getting a national audience, which gives them kind of security, even if they are a little bit more kind of at risk at home in their district. So.
Yeah. All right. So, America, keep your eyes open. John and I have to follow the news and try to stay sane. You should have to do the same thing.
Yes, we certainly encourage it in another year, our little public therapy sessions out here with the news, Bill. So, certainly follow us. Remember, again, follow all the reporters, subscribe to Newsday, and again, at This Week's Long Island News, at TWLI News. You can catch us on podcasts if you miss any part of it, of course, on Spreaker and wherever you get podcasts. So thanks again, as always, Bill. Another good year ahead of us.
And the clock on the wall says it's time for This Week's Long Island News to move on out of here. We thank you for joining us. Remind you can catch This Week's Long Island News every Friday at 3 o'clock right here on 90.3 WHPC.